Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the With Chinese Characteristics podcast. I'm Natalie,
I'm Cherry.
and each episode we bring you a topic with Chinese characteristics. Although this time it is a topic that I researched, even though I am an American, because I was really interested in it, and I think it's a story I haven't really heard anywhere else, really in English media.
I'm excited.
Are you excited, Cherry?
Mm-hmm.
If you've heard of this person, let me know. Liu Yongfu was born October 10th, 1837 in southern China,
Okay.
near the border of Vietnam. His family was extremely poor, subsisting only by manual labor. However, ever since a young age, he'd had dreams that he would one day become a great black tiger general.
What's a black tiger?
Well, I don't know. I was wondering if that was a term. Or,
Yeah, I can't think black tiger general.
or it was just his fantasy. But that's what he thought, supposedly, at a
Okay.
young age.
All right.
And in order to escape such conditions, in 1857, he joined a local militia that was affiliated with the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom.
Okay.
Now, the Taiping Rebellion, I think we talked about it a little bit in the first episode, but it was a huge... Rebellion is almost kind of a small word for it. It was more of a civil war.
It was a civil war.
Yeah, in the middle of the 1800s between the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, who their leaders thought he was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, against the Qing dynasty.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the Taiping Rebellion, I guess there's a lot of interesting things about it, is that even though they were sort of religious fanatics, they were actually more modern and a lot of ways more technically advanced than the Qing Manchurian forces. They kind of had better guns. They had Western equipment.
Right.
So anyway, it was sort of an interesting situation.
At the time in China, when these foreign ministers,
Yeah.
priests,
Missionaries
that came to China, I mean, they were religious people.
Yes,
Not
right?
fanatics, but I mean, yeah, they sort of represented a more advanced,
More modernized.
idea of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was focused or was most powerful in the south of China. Its capital was Nanjing. I didn't write it down, but I remember that. Its capital was Nanjing.
Okay.
So he joined an affiliated militia. However, in 1864, and this rebellion had gone on for almost 20 years, the Qing forces finally retook Nanking, or Nanjing now,
Sure.
and crushed the heart of the Taiping Rebellion.
Okay.
Now Qing forces were moved, and when I say Qing in this, I just mean China, essentially, right? The Qing Empire, the Qing dynasty was people controlling China. Now Qing forces were moving south through China, destroying any remaining pockets of resistance they found.
Okay.
It was only a matter of time before they reached Guangxi province,
Which is where he is.
which is where
He was,
Liu
yeah.
Yongfu is,
Yeah.
and got to him.
Okay.
In many areas of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, they had actively performed genocides against any Manchu, who were the ethnicity of the Qing court.
Okay.
So they basically killed any
Manchurians
that were in the Taiping regions. They basically killed,
Okay.
and they killed maybe up to 50 to 100,000 of them.
Yeah.
So the Qing dynasty basically decided to take revenge, and any Taiping civilians, especially if they were part of certain ethnic groups in China that were more likely to be affiliated with the...
How do they know if someone's...
I think they speak a certain dialect of Chinese. So they basically,
Yes.
if you speak some of these dialects, they would just automatically kill you. And
So ethnic minorities that probably came from the south part of
Yes.
China. Okay.
So they supposedly killed more than 1 million civilians in Guangdong province alone.
Okay.
The Qing did in their retribution.
That's a big number.
Yeah. And so Liu knew, or Yongfu, right? Because Yongfu would be his first name.
Yes.
Yongfu knew he was in trouble. He decided now was the perfect time to become a black tiger general.
Okay.
After all, the Qing armies couldn't kill him if he had an army of his own.
So in order to become a black tiger general, he's going to raise an army and just call himself the black tiger
Well,
general. He doesn't have to go to like a Black Tiger General School.
No, I don't think so.
Or anything like that.
Well, I don't think they'd let him in there because, he's a traitor to the Chinese state.
I'm not sure there were,
Black Tiger
military
General
schools in China in general. I mean, there were for the Manchurians.
I'm sure, yeah, for the Manchurians.
Yeah.
So he started with 200 of his comrades from the Taiping Rebellion.
Oh, 200?
Yes.
And he was the leader?
Yes.
Okay.
Even though he was just this wandering peasant who was working. Okay. So he started with 200 comrades, and he abandoned his kind of unit, and he crossed the border into Vietnam.
Okay.
Because even though Vietnam was sort of a client state of the Qings, they couldn't just march armies in there and kill him, right? It was technically a different country.
Yeah.
So he named this force of bandits the Black Flag Army. Which is Hei Chi Chun.
Hei Chi, yeah.
Hei Chi Chun?
Jun.
Jun? Okay.
Yeah. What's Chun?
I don't know.
How do you spell it?
It's spelled Chun.
Chun. Okay, so that might not actually be Mandarin.
Okay.
Chinese.
It might be dialect.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it might be a Cantonese or something.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
So his crew, and it's going to become quite a crew, did have all different ethnic groups, but it was primarily the ethnic groups of the south of China.
Okay.
I think it's one of them is like Zhaung. It's like Zhuang. Zhuangzi. Okay, so
Zhuang
those are
ethnic.
like, yeah. So it might be, some of the words might be a little different.
Mm-hmm.
So he set up a stronghold on the banks of the Red River, which is the big river that goes through north of Vietnam.
Yeah.
Next to Hanoi, near the city of Son Tay. However, this area of Vietnam already had its own groups of bandits who were unhappy about the arrival of the Black Flag Army.
There can only be one militia in town.
One group of bandits.
Yeah.
However, Yongfu's forces defeated them, which impressed the Vietnamese court. Thinking that he was better as a friend than a foe, the Vietnamese government legitimized him, giving him a military rank in 1869.
Wow.
So now he's official.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So now he's a real general.
So the Vietnamese government at the time,
yes,
they for doing this, they were not in active rebellions of the Qing court?
No, because obviously, China didn't know who this guy is, right? How do they know who this random guy is?
Okay, so it's not like his name is on a wanted list anywhere. But he was just like they're hunting down Taiping rebellions.
He's literally like a day worker who joined the militia, and then he's like, guys, let's get out of here and go to Vietnam. Otherwise, they're going to kill us.
So as far as the Vietnamese court knows, he's not a wanted.
They know he's a bandit. He's literally has a bandit army.
Okay.
But they don't know anything about his history.
Gotcha.
As far as I know. And so as far as I can tell, the Vietnamese court is in Hanoi because at this point, France has most of the south of Vietnam.
Yeah.
So it's only really the north of Vietnam that's still independent. Mm-hmm. So now Yongfu was the commander of a real actual army, and real actual armies need bases. Mm-hmm. He decided to seize the town of Lao Cai on the border between China and Vietnam.
Okay.
This put him into conflict with another group of bandits, the much larger Yellow Flag Army.
Okay.
So now we have the Black Flag Army versus the Yellow Flag Army.
Yes, maybe we'll cut that out later.
Yeah, right? So the Yellow Flag Army skirmished with him a bit, and it was like 3 or 4 times his size. And then they said they wanted to negotiate.
How big was his unit?
I think still at this point it's fairly small. So maybe 200, 300 people, right?
Okay.
So it could have been larger, but there aren't really good records of this. So one thing I'll mention, and this is going to be a plea at the end of this, almost all of the information about this situation of this guy is either in Chinese, Vietnamese, or French. There's very little on him in English. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit hard to get some of the info because I don't speak any of those languages. So the Yellow Flag Army, under a false truce, invited him in to negotiate.
Okay.
Then they set off a bomb to try and kill Liu Yongfu.
Okay.
But he survived, and the Black Flag Army then won the ensuing battle and pushed the Yellow Flag Army back towards China.
Wow. Wait, so the black, no, the yellow flag army is
also Chinese bandits.
Also, okay, gotcha. Yes. That's why they're. Okay. I was wondering why they're both called.
Almost everybody in this story is going to be either, even though almost all of the story is going to take place in Vietnam, almost everybody involved is Chinese or French.
Okay.
The Vietnamese are just kind of, I guess trying not to get killed, right?
By the French
or the Chinese. Or the Chinese.
Yeah, a suppressed history.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in a diplomatic coup, Yongfu continued his campaign against the Yellow Flags by allying with a Chinese army sent to deal with the bandit group. I think because the Yellow Flags were more based in China, China was fighting them.
So they were a problem for the Chinese government,
yes.
But Yongfu's army was not.
No, because he's legit now,
okay.
Right? He has a military commission by Vietnam.
Yeah, okay.
And so together they sent the Yellow Flag scattering, and the general of the Chinese force, Feng Zikai, offered Yongfu an honorary commission in the Chinese army.
He's really done pretty well for himself
right?
At this point.
So now he has a commission in the Vietnamese army and the Chinese army.
Yeah.
And he's got friends in the Chinese military. So now Yongfu had his own army, his own city, and diplomatic recognition by both China and Vietnam. It was time to make some money. He began taxing all traffic on the Red River between Vietnam and China, taking 10% of all goods.
The natural next step,
right?
You
know, you take control, now you start taxing, right? And obviously, this was a lot of money because this was a way to get into the heart of China. It was basically one of the only river routes through there. I mean, otherwise you'd have to go through ports and stuff. The Yellow River and the Yangtze River are much further north.
Okay.
Right?
And this is the Red River.
This is the Red River.
Okay.
So he became incredibly wealthy. He could afford Western weapons to equip his army and Western officers to train them.
Wow.
For the next few years, he grew his army into a force of over 7,000, trained it, and used it to fight off rival bandits.
Okay.
So apparently, he ended up hiring a lot of the Western officers who had helped the Taiping Rebellion because they...
When you say Western?
I mean like French, American, British, German, because I think a real good gig was you either kind of semi-retire as an officer and then you go work for one of these foreign countries for a while because they pay much better than your own army. So, you go, train, like a lot of Confederate soldiers after the Civil War, train troops in Egypt.
Oh, okay.
Because,
I didn't know that.
They didn't really know what else to do.
Right.
And so, they couldn't join back the American army. So they went to Egypt or they went to other places to teach them kind of like Western drill and all that kind of stuff.
We can probably one day do an episode on Western military talents.
Oh, in China?
Or Asia, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a lot that went to Japan too, right?
Oh, yeah. No, definitely there's a lot.
Shogo? What am I talking about? Shogo's our friend. Shogun period.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right? When they transitioned the military from...
Oh, you mean the Bakumatsu like in 1860s?
Yes,
when they opened up the country.
Not Shogun's much before that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm mixing up my history here. But yeah, sorry, continue.
So these people were all over the place, right?
Okay.
And he apparently had quite a few of them. And, he used them to train his troops.
Okay.
However, there was another group of bandits moving in the region. Since 1858, the French had been steadily expanding their colony in the area of South Vietnam. In 1873, an ambitious French explorer and military officer named Francis Garnier was called to Hanoi to resolve a dispute involving a French citizen. So Hanoi, technically independent. It's in the north of Vietnam.
Okay.
But he was this officer, and there was some sort of issue with the local government, so they sent him there to deal with it.
Gotcha.
However, while he was there, he decided the time was right for the entirety of North Vietnam, called Tonkin, to become a French colonial possession. He began seizing forts along the Red River to cement his claim. What was left of Vietnam lacked a professional modern army that could face even this small French force. Now, I'm not entirely sure how small Garnier's force was, but it's probably maybe like 100, 200 people.
Okay.
So very small, but that was fairly typical of the time period of you'd have 200 guys get off a boat and take a fort, and now, China has to sign a treaty with you and give you a bunch of money or whatever. So,
It's all it takes.
It's all it takes back then.
Yeah.
So Vietnam had no army that could really resist him. Mm-hmm. However, they did know someone who did. That someone...
Let me guess.
Yeah. That someone was Liu Yongfu.
Yeah.
And he wasn't about to share his racket with the French. He agreed to help. Mm-hmm. So what France wanted to do is apparently all of the ports on the Chinese coast had certain taxes and stuff.
Yeah.
And they could get better deals if they went up the Red River. So they wanted that river so then they could get access to the heart of China and bypass all the treaty ports.
Okay.
So Liu Yongfu approached Hanoi with a few hundred soldiers marching under gigantic black flags. French troops began firing at them with a small cannon, and then Liu Yongfu retreated beyond the range of the cannon.
The French people, you said that they only have 200 people.
Yeah, maybe like...
But Liu Yongfu had 7,000 even before this.
Yeah, but that's... I mean, but
maybe locally he only had a
he only took a few hundred people with him.
Okay.
So, I mean, when you read about these kind of colonial events, it will be, though, like 50,000 Chinese troops attack, 1,000 British guys, right? And then the British people, kill 20,000 Chinese and run them off because, the British troops or colonial troops, they typically had modern weapons. They had Western drill, and they were more motivated. And in a lot of cases, these Asian troops, the Chinese troops especially, they're just like conscripts.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the Manchus, the Qing court, wouldn't send their good troops to go fight.
They wouldn't send the Manchurians.
No, they wouldn't send the Manchurians because they were like, well, what if we got to put down another rebellion or something, right? Yeah. So the kind of the general sort of consensus is that they're basically sort of like a joke. Okay. And very rarely, up until this point, do you ever have any situation where, especially in Asia, a Western force gets taken out by an Asian force.
100 years of shame.
Yes, exactly.
Started, actually,
more like 1840s it started probably.
Yeah,
first
like
Opium
before,
War.
Yeah, before this.
Yeah.
Not that long ago, though.
So Liu Yongfu approached with giant banners.
Okay.
They shot at him. He retreated a little bit outside their range. So Francis Garnier, used to seeing off primitive bands of poorly led and motivated Asian troops, set out with 18 Marines to chase them away from the city. The soldiers raced forward, led by Garnier. So, and this is following description is by Colonel Tamazi, who is a French historian of Indochina, which is what it was known back then.
Yes.
So 1.5 kilometers from the town, he found himself in front of a dike, which is like a barrier to stop water. Okay. And slipped and fell while trying to cross it. Some black flags hidden beyond the dike ran out while others opened fire. At this moment, the two men who were accompanying Garnier were 100 meters behind him. One of them was killed by a bullet and the other wounded. Garnier cried, "To me, brave boys, and we'll give them a thrashing." He then fired the 6 rounds from his revolver in an attempt to rescue himself, but the bandits surrounded him, pierced him with thrusts of sabers and lances, cut off his head, mutilated his corpse, and ran away. So,
oh boy,
this is from the French perspective, right?
Yeah.
A second French officer tried to run in to help with his group of troops and was also killed, and the surviving troops fled back to Hanoi.
Okay.
So this was extremely embarrassing for the French because the two kind of head officers they had there both got themselves killed.
Yeah.
And they just decided and Francis Garnier wasn't supposed to be doing this anyway. He didn't have any orders.
Yeah.
So they're like, let's just kind of just pretend it didn't happen. So they just kind
of...
It
was just some local troops.
Yeah.
Getting a bit... by
bandits or something.
Hot-blooded.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So they're like, you know what? Let's just kind of ignore it. We'll pretend it didn't happen. Basically we're sorry.
Okay.
Right? So it kind of dropped the matter. Didn't go any further. So all was well for the time. Liu Yongfu became richer, the black flags became more powerful, and everyone essentially left them alone. They did kind of have to fight off other bandit groups, but none of these could really match them because they had so much money at this point and so many weapons.
Yeah.
So in 1881, so this is 8 years later,
okay,
naval officer Henry Riviere was sent to Hanoi to resolve a dispute involving a French merchant. He decided now was a good time for the entirety of North Vietnam to become a French colonial possession.
One is not a good time. No. One was not a good time, yes. Yeah.
So he basically, it's the exact same situation, right? Okay. He gets there and he's like, well, while I'm here,
Yeah.
Let's just take this place, right?
Yeah. Why have we left this little corner?
They can't stop us, right? What are they going to do?
Yeah.
So he first seized the fort of Hanoi.
Okay.
But then upon sort of commands from above, he gave it back. And
he gave it back. Why did he
give it back to the Vietnamese? Because I think the French diplomat in the region was like, no, you can't do this, right? We gotta not do this.
Okay.
So he gave it back.
Okay.
And Vietnam lacked a professional modern army that could face even this small French force. They did, however, know someone who did. This time, though, that someone was Qing China.
So no longer Liu Yongfu.
So, he's still around.
Yeah.
But while the French had inflicted a humiliating defeat upon the Qing 20 years earlier in the Second Opium War, that was with the help of the British against a far weaker Chinese state. The Qing Empire had spent the last 20 years self-strengthening, and that's the kind of official name for the Qing movement or the Qing court's movement to modernize. It was called the self-strengthening movement.
Oh, okay.
So
I didn't know the translation of it.
So what is it in Chinese?
What year was this?
It started in 1860.
Okay.
It was basically right after the kind of the end of the Opium War. The emperor died. The new emperor's mom and also the old empress.
Yeah.
They had their little Shishi and Sushi and Xian was the former empress. They had a little alliance, and they decided that modern. Anyway, so China was modernizing, at least its armies.
Attempting to
modernize. They were buying Western guns, training their troops in Western fashion, and generally making themselves less of a target to be bullied. They told France in no uncertain terms to leave the Tonkin area alone. Chinese troops began to enter North Vietnam. So, the French were not keen on being the first ones to test the resolve of this new self-strengthened China, and instead signed a treaty with China's diplomat Li Hongzhang.
Li Hongzhang?
Okay. What she said, splitting up the Tonkin area between French and Chinese area of control.
What's Li Hongzhang's? What's the last? I don't want to get it wrong. Just how do you spell it?
Hongzhang.
Yeah, Li Hongzhang. Okay.
I think he's a famous diplomat.
He is. I just want to make sure. Yeah.
So they split up Vietnam between Chinese and French areas of control.
Yeah.
The Vietnamese were not consulted. So Henry Riviere was not happy about this.
I can imagine.
The Tonkin region belonged to France, and the Chinese and Vietnamese were simply a bunch of paper tigers France had no business negotiating with.
Okay.
If he could simply seize the area with the troops he had at his disposal, China would be forced to accept the new status quo. After all, it had worked plenty of times in the past. So
yes,
he had 500 plus troops with him.
Okay, that's all it takes back in the days to have some confidence.
Yes.
So
he set out to start capturing forts along the Red River.
Okay.
Just like Garnier had done.
Sure.
So while he was gone from Hanoi, the Vietnamese attempted to attack the French garrison there and sort of push them out of the city because he was gone with most of the troops.
Okay.
Liu Yongfu and his Black Flags also assisted, but in name only. He did not like the Vietnamese. Despite a huge numerical advantage, the attack failed. And basically, the implication is they just sort of sat back. They didn't do anything. The Black Flags.
They've just let it happen.
They just kind of let it happen.
Okay.
Tang Jingsong, who is another famous diplomat and general. Do you know who he is?
Tan Jingsong?
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
China's top official in the area intervened.
Okay.
Convincing Liu Yongfu to fight the French and agreeing to send him supplies from China.
Okay.
So
he's state what do you call it? State sponsored now.
Yeah. So now he's state sponsored by China.
Okay.
Right. Now Yongfu was committed and ready to fight the French a second time.
Okay.
Though obviously this is a much larger French force, right?
Yeah. Could you call this the official French force?
It's still not a war or anything, right? This is just some people, right?
Okay.
But
bigger than the last time it was 200
yes.
little.
I mean, 500 people. I mean, that's a proper kind of little army, right? That could take out a lot of stuff in the area.
Yeah.
So Liu Yongfu waited for Riviere to return to Hanoi with his forces and soon began taunting him. He taunted him. He put giant posters outside the walls calling him a coward and a bandit. So I'm not sure if the posters were in French or in Chinese.
Or Vietnamese or like.
But supposedly he could read him because it really made Riviere annoyed. So the text of the posters, and it's quite long, is recorded. So I'm going to tell it to you in English.
Okay.
So the valiant warrior Liu. So actually maybe it's Liu because I think it's separate. I think the place I'm reading it, Liu is his last name, right?
Yeah, Liu.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the valiant warrior Liu, general and military governor of 3 provinces, which I don't think he actually is, has decided to wage war. He makes this proclamation to the French bandits. Everyone knows you are thieves. Other nations despise you. Whenever you come to a country, you claim that you have come to preach the faith, but you really wish to stir up the inhabitants with false rumors. You claim to have come to trade, but in fact you are plotting to take over the country. You act like wild animals. You are as fierce as tigers and wolves. Ever since you came to Vietnam, you have seized cities and killed governors. Your crimes are as numerous as the hairs on my head. You have taken over the customs and seized the revenues. This crime deserves death. I think that's the crime that deserves death, is cutting in on Liu Yongfu's profits, right?
Exactly, yeah. But he's playing what do you call it? Psychological warfare now. Yeah.
So he says, the inhabitants have been reduced to misery. The country is nearly ruined. God and man both loathe you. Heaven and earth both reject you. I have now been ordered to wage war. My 3 armies are massed like clouds. My rifle and cannon are as many as the trees of the forest. We are eager to attack you in your devil's den and to suppress all disloyal subjects. But this company's welfare weighs heavily with me. I cannot bear to turn Hanoi into a battlefield in case I ruin its merchants and people. So first I am making this proclamation. You French bandits, if you think you are strong enough, send your rabble soldiers to Phu Hoi to fight in the open field with my tiger warriors. Then we will see who is the strongest. If you are afraid to come, cut off the heads of your chief men and present them to me. Then give back the cities you have taken. I am a merciful commander, and I will let you miserable ants live. But if you delay, my army will take your city and kill you all, and not even a blade of grass will mark where you stood. You must choose between happiness and disaster. Life is but a step away from death.
How deep?
Mark my words well.
Did the French bite? I'm very interested now.
So seemingly, this really pissed Henry Riviere off.
Yeah.
Especially probably because this is the same guy who killed the last French officer who came. And
Francis Garnier.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the first guy who died, it's sort of interesting because, he's just a guy who was only there with a couple hundred men. But it was a very sort of romantic death to the French, right? They remembered him, right? Then,
Okay, I can imagine that.
Right?
Yeah.
So he set out with his forces to kill Liu Yongfu and his Black Flag Army. Over 500 men and 3 cannons marched out on May 19th, 1883 to confront the bandit leader.
Okay.
Now remember, so it's interesting because in a lot of the French accounts, they just refer to these guys as like pirates. Like they don't even
recognize
like, like that they're kind of like a real thing. But,
they think we're the legit government of Vietnam and this is our, anyone else is just little
bandits, right?
Bandits, yeah.
And technically they are just bandits, right? To an extent. But though now they have legitimacy.
Liu Yongfu had caught the French people.
Yes.
The bandits.
Yes.
But
I mean, he set out to be bandits. I guess the French set out to be bandits too, right? Mm-hmm. So, morale in the French force was high, and while they knew that they would be outnumbered, colonial forces were used to huge lopsided victories.
Okay.
And this only got kind of more prominent as time went on, as technology advanced, because early on in the colonial period, people are kind of armed with similar weapons, but at this point, you're starting to see revolvers and kind of like rapid firing rifles and things, so all sorts of advances.
So the French had
3 cannons and 500 Marines.
Okay.
So for example, when they defended Hanoi against the Vietnamese earlier, they were outnumbered almost 20-1 and took almost no losses.
Wow. Okay.
So
technology.
But that was when Liu Yongfu wasn't actually fighting.
Yeah.
So the force began crossing a bridge near a paper mill, and the battle was then called in France the Battle of Paper Bridge because the bridge was over the water by a paper mill.
Paper mill, okay.
So there was bamboo groves around the road, and as they went over the river, they started taking fire from Black Flag riflemen to the front. Mm-hmm. So Henry ordered his troops forward, And as they advanced, two flanking forces of Black Flag infantry approached from hills on either side. They advanced, formed up in ranks, kneeled, and began firing into the French. Mm-hmm. Riviere was killed, along with several other officers, and the French forces were forced to retreat back to Hanoi. So the French lost like 50 or 60 people killed, and more wounded, and they would have been completely routed, but they were close enough to the bridge that they could get across the bridge, and it was, it's not that big of a bridge, so the Black Flags couldn't really follow them across.
It must be a big deal because this is the second time.
Oh yeah, it's the second time, right?
Yeah.
So they were forced to retreat. They had to leave all their guns behind.
Okay.
And most of their top officers were killed.
More for Liu Yongfu.
Yes, more for Liu Yongfu.
Liu Yongfu's army supplies.
And also the Black Flag casualties were fairly low.
Okay.
They were kind of similar to the French casualties. The Black Flags in the actual battle supposedly had about 1,500 men.
Okay.
Which again is fairly even considering for the time period, right? That wouldn't be considered by colonial forces to be at a disadvantage, right? 3 to 1. Mm-hmm. So this was another humiliating defeat. Even though they were outnumbered roughly 3 to 1, the Black Flags were technically only bandits. France began sending more forces into the region. Mm-hmm. While some of them were technically victories, they were not the all-out defeats the international community expected. So basically what happened after this was the Black Flags won this battle. Mm-hmm. The French forces retreated back to Hanoi. Mm-hmm. All this was unofficial, right? Garnier wasn't supposed to do this.
Yeah.
But then there was a new French government, and the new French government was pro-colonialist. So they're like, what? We can't let this stand. We got to go there.
Got to put our foot down.
We got to put our foot down. We got to take these people out. So they sent many more troops, right? So they sent thousands and thousands of troops to Vietnam.
So now it's official. Now it's a war.
Yes. But still, it's only against the Black Flags. China's not involved yet.
Right. I thought the Black Flags were just the militia.
I know, right? They're just some dudes who are
bandits
who are taxing river traffic.
Mm-hmm. When you say the international community,
well, people made fun of them.
Okay.
Because it was like, come on, guys, like, you can't take these bandits in Vietnam or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, because when you look at things like the First and Second Opium Wars or other sort of events where it's like, so in 1860, I mean, with not that many troops, the British and French, as I'm sure you know, landed, marched to the Summer Palace, looted it, and left.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, nothing really stopped them from doing.
No, they just came in and they just walked in and walked out.
Yeah. So there was armies, but they all were just defeated, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they all kind of got pushed away. So this was very embarrassing. Here's another example in this sort of early stage of the conflict. The Battle of Phu Hoi involved 2,500 French troops supported by artillery and gunboats. So this was on the banks of one of the rivers.
Okay.
And they were against 3,000 Black Flag troops.
Okay.
So the French had what could be considered a pretty even in manpower, but a large material advantage, right? They had gunboats, they had artillery, they had all this stuff.
And the Black Flags didn't have.
I mean, they had some stuff, but I mean, it wasn't.
It wasn't as advanced.
Yes.
Okay.
So their rifles were probably good because when you're rich, you can just kind of buy the best rifles, but guns.
Liu Yongfu was rich.
Yes, but guns and things like that are kind of harder, right? Especially in the jungle.
So you would have to buy them from I'm guessing the Western countries.
Yeah, but this was back in the day where you could just buy a cannon, right? No one's stopping you, right? You could be a private.
Where would you buy it from? America?
Apparently, Germany was the new hotness for guns.
Oh, okay.
They had there's a German industrial company still around called Krupp, and they made like guns and cannons and things. In the battle, the Black Flags took extremely heavy casualties. However, they did not retreat and were only forced to fall back after heavy rain caused the Red River to burst and flooded their positions. Mm-hmm. So they had to fall back then. But at no point could the French just kind of move unopposed up the Red River.
Okay. So they were giving them a run for their money.
Yes, they were giving them a run for the money.
These bandits.
So and again, it was very kind of, the international, even though like, okay, we fought them and they kind of retreated. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you don't crush them, that's seen as a loss by the international community, right? They're going to make fun of you for it.
The colonialist
community, right? The imperialist community.
Uh-huh.
So 1883 ended with the black flags unbroken, and France planned a campaign to utterly crush them in 1884. Okay. So they're going to bring in more troops, more weapons and things. However, first they needed to make sure China wouldn't intervene. They went to China essentially and said, hey, we want to take these guys out. You can't stop us from taking Vietnam. Sort of like, let's be real here. So just let us take it. We won't humiliate you again in another war.
Yeah. And we won't humiliate you again.
Yes, again, a third time or whatever. So
what did the Qing court say?
The Qing court said no. The Qing court said, basically like piss off. Like we're not, you 100% cannot have North Vietnam, the Tonkin region. If you go in there with heavy troops and you come closer to the Chinese border or you start to take more Vietnamese cities, we're going to declare war on you.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't.
Diplomacy failed, and France decided to simply just seize the whole region in 1884, and thinking that we can just take this thing before China has a time to react. This kind of led to this sort of strange unofficial war period, because there were tens of thousands of Qing troops in Vietnam, in the cities that France was taking, and they would fight the French. But
so they actually sent troops there, or they were already there?
They were already there. Okay. They've been there for like a couple of years. They went there.
What were they there for to begin with?
Because, when the original guy, Garnier, came, they started garrisoning troops near the Chinese border. Okay. The Qing court sent troops over.
So they were already sort of
They've been there for a year or two, right? So there's troops already in there, but the Chinese Qing troops performed very poorly, basically, from what I can tell.
They're not the black flags?
No, and the majority of the heavy fighting was done by the black flags. Okay. Something which very much annoyed them.
Annoyed the
Liu Yongfu and the black flags.
Oh,
because we're the ones getting killed, right?
And
these
like,
Chinese troops
you're
are
the
worthless.
official military.
Yes.
And we're shouldering the...
Yes.
Yeah.
We're shouldering the burden. We're fighting an entire country over here.
Yeah. They're like, do a job, will you?
Yes.
No, we're the ones doing the job.
We're the one doing the job.
Yeah.
Liu Yongfu's black flags were extremely prominent in this effort, often proving more effective than the regular Qing soldiers. However, as the war went on, the black flags found themselves fighting and dying while the Qing state troops would simply retreat. Eventually, they began...
that's like the oldest play in the book that was played again, the Chinese...
right?
When the Japanese had invaded China.
Yeah. Let the nationals fight them.
Yeah. We'll let the nationals fight them. We'll just preserve our power. When I say we, I mean the CCP. But
yeah, exactly, right?
In case if you didn't know.
Yeah, let somebody else fight your enemy for you, or better, let your two enemies fight it out.
Yeah.
And the Sino-French War is kind of confusing, and I don't want to go into it too much because it's kind of complicated. But basically, what happened was.
So this at this point, because the Qing troops there and the Qing court has said no, you're not taking it.
Yes.
It's actually a war.
It's not a war yet.
But you just said Sino-French War.
Okay, but this is what we're getting to.
Okay.
So
sorry.
Basically, what happened was France took some cities and they essentially forced China into yet another one of those humiliating treaties. And the treaty was like, we get this, and you got to move your troops back, and yada, yada, yada,
I've lost count.
Yes.
Yeah, you're telling me an hotel.
But then it got passed, or it got signed, and it was extremely unpopular in China. Okay. And they're like, and basically the Qing court was like, okay, how can we get out of this? And the treaty said that they're going to remove their troops from North Vietnam, but it didn't have a date. So they just never moved their troops. Okay. And
that... we'll do it sometime down the line.
And one thing led to another, and that essentially went into an all-out war, which was the Sino-French War in 1884 to 1885.
Okay.
So the black flags, again, were very prominent in this war. It's very interesting if you look on like Wikipedia and they have like battles and stuff, and you see like 30 Mandarin flags, and then you see a little black flag, and it goes Liu Yongfu and the Black Flag Army. Yeah. Right? So they're fighting in almost every major battle alongside Qing troops and also on their own. They were everywhere, and they were very annoying to the French. They participated in sieges alongside state troops, ambushed enemy columns, and put pressure on isolated outposts. Okay. One of the people that Liu Yongfu fought with a lot was Tang Jingsong, who was the same guy who convinced him to fight the French originally.
He was a diplomat.
He was the diplomat.
And a general?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's kind of the thing, right, in Qing China, is it's like, if you're an official... They can put you in front of, like, an army, right? It's not considered like a separate career path.
You have to do everything. Yeah.
Probably sometimes why these armies didn't do that well. Because you have like a tax collector in charge of them or something.
Sounds like he's doing well, though.
Yeah, he's doing okay. So yeah, they did sieges, ambush columns, and put pressure on outposts. So for example, the single highest casualty rate of any battle during the whole Sino-French War, so this is the most losses that any French unit took in a single battle, was when 6,000 black flags engaged a French relief column, which means a column marching to relieve somebody, right?
Okay.
Of 3,400 men.
3,400.
Yes.
And the
black flags were 6,000.
Okay.
This is the Battle of Ho Mok, which I'm probably not pronouncing right. They basically engaged the French on the road. The French couldn't get past them.
Okay.
They fought them for a while, and then in the night the black flags went away. But the French lost roughly 500 dead and wounded. The black flags supposedly lost like 1,000, but still, again, that was considered very unusual, right? Especially as they're just supposed to sort of just be like bandits.
Right.
So keep in mind, one of the most famous battles of the war was the Battle of Bang Bo, where basically what happened is that as the war went on, French troops started moving into China.
Okay.
So
they've crossed the border.
They crossed the border, right? Okay.
So escalated this.
They have escalated this. Well, they want Vietnam.
That's the intention, I guess.
That's imperialism for you, right? So in that battle, 20 to 30,000 Qing troops, and also some black flags because they're everywhere, attacked 1,500 French, and they killed and wounded 100 people. So and 1,000 Chinese people died. So and that was
bad, right?
Yeah, that was bad,
okay,
right?
Okay.
And that was technically a victory for the Qing, right? So when you look at these battles,
the standards were different back in the days, I guess. Yeah.
When you look at these battles, it's very interesting because the Liu Yongfu and the Black Flags are very good at what they do.
Yeah.
And
the Qing,
a lot of times they engage them on sort of relatively equal numbers, and they do a lot of damage. And Qing troops just don't seem to be able to do it. I think because I just really think the Qing troops are not very well led. They just kind of march them into killing fields.
They just think it's a numbers game, maybe. Yeah.
Eventually, the war ended. Basically, what happened was Cixi wanted to send more troops to Korea because Japan was causing shenanigans there. Basically, signed a treaty, and even though it was kind of not that great of a treaty for China, because it recognized that France could have northern Vietnam. Okay. It wasn't one of those completely embarrassing treaties that you're used to, because on land, the Qing actually won. They pushed the French forces back into Vietnam. They had to retreat, and it actually caused the collapse of the French government because it was such an embarrassment.
Oh, great.
So, but really, Cixi didn't want to keep pushing it.
But what did they recognize again?
That France could have North Vietnam. Okay. Because, they were already there anyway.
But what, back home, the French government was collapsing?
Yeah, because
of how much of a...
Because a lot of French people died. It wasn't just a complete walkover. Right. It cost a lot of money, and China didn't agree to pay any indemnities, right? Which is the usual thing. Okay. If you ever read about a lot of these wars with China had a lot of money. And so the general idea is you fight a war with China, then you beat them, and then you make them pay you reparations. Yeah. And then you finance your war against them.
Future wars too.
Future wars too. Yeah. It's like looting a city in Civ. But this time they didn't get that. And it caused the French government to fall, and the prime minister lost his job.
That's something that the Qing court has done.
Yes. Yeah. So that was embarrassing for the French. Part of the treaty stated that Liu Yongfu had to leave the Tonkin region.
Okay, they're he's so much trouble.
Yeah, they're the Black Flags have to be disbanded, and he has to go. He disbanded the Black Flags.
Wasn't he angry? He would do it?
I think basically, they gave him a job back in China. Okay. They gave him a job as a government official, right? And he was old.
That's not as cool.
And he's old now, so he's 48.
Right. I mean, come on.
Well, just
that's
listen.
No job.
Well, just wait. Okay. So, then this isn't even the good part. So, Liu Yongfu returned to China with a few chosen companions. Okay. And the Black Flag Army was officially disbanded in 1885. However, most of his troops still had their rifles, and immediately got back to banditry, plaguing the French for years to come. There were so many of them, apparently, that they were even like taking over towns for the next like 5 years.
Okay.
So, Liu Yongfu, now 48, retired to Guangdong in the Qing Empire, where he originally had started off fighting against when he was in the Taiping Rebellion. Now they have given him an official military appointment. So now he's like a governor in like a little region.
Okay.
10 years passed.
Yeah.
China suffers a humiliating defeat at the hands of the emergent Japanese Empire, and part of the settlement is the island of Taiwan. The governor of Taiwan was Tang Jingsung, the same official who had convinced Liu Yongfu to fight for the Qing.
Yeah.
And rather than hand Taiwan over to the Japanese, he declared Formosa an independent republic and called his old friend Liu Yongfu to help.
Okay.
Tang Jingsung left.
So let me get this straight. So the Qing court goes, you could have the island.
Yeah.
And the governor on the island
like,
goes,
no.
no, you can't have it.
No, you can't have the island.
And
you can't have it if it doesn't belong to you.
In order to do it,
now.
he goes, well, it's not the Qing empires to give.
Yes.
So Formosa back in the days, now Taiwan.
So it was called the Republic of Formosa.
Formosa, okay.
And Tang Jingsung was the first president.
Okay.
But then he left. Liu Yongfu came on the island, started a guerrilla war against the Japanese.
Okay.
And became the second president.
Wow, okay.
So he arrived in June. However, obviously, it was never going to work, right? So there was, the Japanese came on. Yeah. They, cleared the whole island. He fought them for 3 months, and then he was forced to escape. So at this point, he's 58.
Well, he tried.
He tried, right?
Yeah. 3 months is a...
And if you look on his Wikipedia page, he's officially the second president of the Republic of Formosa.
Okay. I mean, 3 months is a long time.
3 months is a long time.
How long did it take for the Germans to take France? Not,
not maybe
3
not
months.
3 months.
So, yeah.
So he was forced to flee. So he fled on a British merchant ship.
Okay.
The Japanese really wanted to get him because I think he was very annoying to them, much like he'd been to the French.
So
the Japanese began stopping British merchant ships.
Just for him? Just to search for him. Okay.
But they were unable to find Liu or Yongfu, even though they stopped his ship because he had disguised himself as a coolie.
As a coolie.
Yes.
Oh my. Okay, if you listen to the first episode, a coolie is basically Chinese or Indian labor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's what he was born as, Cherry. So he had some experience.
Yeah.
So one day later, the Republic surrendered.
Okay.
And then Japan, this caused a minor diplomatic incident. Japan had to officially apologize to the United Kingdom for stopping one of their ships without reason.
Okay.
Because they just wanted to get him so bad.
Well, but did UK know that Liu Yongfu was on the boat?
I don't know.
They weren't smuggling him out. It was just himself disguising as a coolie getting hired.
Because if you think about it, right? This isn't your typical Chinese official, right?
Yeah.
He grew up as like a manual laborer.
Yeah.
He was in the jungle as a bandit he could figure out how to get on a ship and
probably. Okay. And I'm assuming that it was not uncommon that a UK ship would hire Chinese labor.
Well, yeah, or
right?
He just he was on it for some reason. He might have just bought a ticket and said, I'm going back to China. I don't want to be part of Japan or something, right?
Okay, so he made it happen. Okay,
he made it happen, right? He spent the next 23 years of his life living in actual retirement as a government official. He was famed for his ability to resolve civil disputes and hunt down bandits.
He went back to China.
Yeah,
even though he was the second president of the what do you call the
Republic of Formosa?
Yeah. Formosa, which is technically is a self-proclaimed
sovereign state.
Yes.
Yeah. But he was used
rebellion.
To it. But it wasn't his first rebellion.
I know, but that would be a very high-profile,
he got away with it.
Rebellion towards the Qing court. No, the Qing court was just like, we have other problems.
Yeah, and
that's fine.
And I think honestly, in a way, even though he wasn't Han Chinese, but I think he was extremely a Chinese nationalist, right? He believed in kind of, I think, the prestige and the people of China. And why else go to Taiwan to fight the Japanese for 3 months when you're 58, right?
Well, Tang Jingsung was his old friend.
Yes.
I get your point.
He just, he didn't, and I think he had friends in the Qing court.
Is nationalist a good word? to describe what that was?
I think as long as it's not like ethno-nationalism. I mean, he's definitely like a freedom fighter, I think.
Right.
I think
a freedom fighter.
Right?
Yeah.
And again, he might have done some really bad things, but all those things are probably in French, so I don't really know about them.
Well,
right?
if any of the listeners, the few that we have, but yeah.
So he spent the next 23 years of his life in actual retirement as a government official.
Back in China.
Back in China. I think back in Guangdong province. Mm-hmm. So he was famous for his ability to hunt down bandits, resolve civil disputes. He loved keeping up with the news and followed the formation of the Chinese Republic with great interest.
Okay.
However, he had to have all his newspapers read to him because he never learned to read.
Wow. Okay.
Apparently, one of his favorite possessions in his old age was Francis Garnier's watch, which had a picture of his wife inside the cover.
Oh, Francis Garnier's wife?
Yeah, the first guy he killed.
God.
The first French guy he killed.
Yes, I remember him because that was I thought that was a very French name for some reason.
Yes. Well, so supposedly there's some, obviously everybody says, but some things say like, especially when he was young, he was like really good at martial arts.
Okay.
And some things say that he killed Francis Garnier personally. Himself.
Okay.
But I don't really have any way of verifying that.
Well, at this point, it would just be like a urban legend.
Yes. It might be one of the last things he did. He died in 1917 at 80 years old. He'd fought for the Taipings. He'd fought against the Chinese, for the Chinese, for the Vietnamese, against the French, against the Japanese. He'd basically for Formosa.
Yeah.
Supposedly, and this is more of he did, but I can't find it in English anywhere. He dictated his memoirs, and they're written down.
Oh.
And they're in Chinese.
Oh, so it's a book somewhere today.
He dictated his memoirs.
Okay.
But I could not find a copy in English.
Okay.
Someone should translate them.
Okay, I'm gonna look it up after.
His home is a tourist destination in Qinzhou.
Mm-hmm.
Qinzhou. I don't know.
Qizhou,
I think, a city in southern China.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting though, but apparently, he did all these things. He's very famous. Him and his black flags were fighting the French. But apparently when he was old, what he liked to reminisce about was his fights with the yellow flags. And the French people were like a footnote.
Yeah.
That was when he really thought he was sort of living his best life.
Interesting.
Was when he was on the run from the Qing.
Yeah.
Fighting rival bandits in the jungles of Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Another French thing is like,
he probably had a lot of freedom. I mean, I get that he was the bandit on the run, right? But he was young, right? He was younger.
Yeah.
And
interestingly, I don't think he had a queue. I think he well, to work for the Taiping, he wouldn't have a queue. He would cut his hair. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then I think he eventually started working with the Chinese again, but with the Qing again. But but he was he's sort of outside the system. Yeah, right? He has his own army.
Yeah.
Right? They needed him, so he could kind of do his own thing.
Interesting.
So yeah, I'm not sure where else he traveled, but that's the story of Liu Yongfu.
So how did you
and the black flag? Well, so
how did you hear about him?
I was originally gonna do this on the Sino-French War.
Okay.
And I was looking at it, and it's just everywhere. He pops up. He pops up more than the actual Chinese troops do, right?
Okay.
He and the black flags, they're everywhere. And I think it's very interesting, right? Because it's, there's a lot of Asian forces, especially in the Qing dynasty.
Yeah.
With these very sort of grandiose names, and they never actually really accomplish anything. Right?
Okay.
They'll be like the whatever, these like banner systems, like, or, you have like the Boxer Rebellion, right? And you have these boxers who think they're, Society of Harmonious Fist or whatever.
Yeah.
Who think that, they have these special powers. But Liu Yongfu, he built up this persona around himself and his Black Flag army. Supposedly they marched around under giant black banners, and he gave commands with giant black flags. And in France, they actually have some of the flags that they capture from certain units.
Okay.
But confusingly, the one that I saw was red. So he supposedly had giant banners, which were bordered in silver.
Okay.
And he knew how to use that reputation.
Yeah, clearly.
The French were scared of him.
Mm-hmm.
They were angry at him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he was the real deal. So I just thought that was interesting because normally you don't you don't kind of see these sort of romanticized adventurers.
No.
From
the official history.
Qing China, because it all seems very boring and kind of court mandated, and everybody has to be in the system, right?
Yeah.
But this guy was completely outside of the system.
He was in and out.
Yes, but
sort of sounds like it was on his own.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, I'm gonna go leave for 3 months and run a rebellion in Taiwan.
Yeah.
Right?
Why not?
Why not? You know, I want to do it.
Yeah.
And he got away with it. And he lived to 80.
That's a long life
for someone
at that age and at that time.
Yeah, and
China.
For someone who had done as much as he'd done.
Yeah.
So I thought he was very interesting.
Huh.
If we ever go to southern China, I want to go visit his house.
Okay.
It's like a tourist destination.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. So you should look up his memoirs, because I
definitely will. I think one takeaway though is because I didn't know much about Indochina War, but it's sort of like at this time, right, in the border of China, like around the border of China.
Yeah.
Like how he was able to form the militia, how there's all these smaller unofficial fights that lead to bigger fights.
Oh yeah, right.
But when we say small, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, these aren't the official army, or when you said it, right?
Yeah.
But it's like 500 people died in one battle.
Yeah.
Right? And then that's like, but today, if 500 people die in a battle, that would be, I don't know,
Well, I don't know. You're saying it'd be a big deal or not a big deal?
It would be a huge deal.
Oh, yeah, it would be.
I don't even remember when the last time I heard that 500 people died in a war.
I think you have to put things into perspective for that time period.
Yeah.
It's closer to today than it is to what the next 100 years.
Okay.
World War I and World War II broke the kind of natural world order.
Yeah.
And made us kind of used to these massive body counts. But I mean, if you have French troops in Vietnam and they get ambushed because Henry Riviere is a doofus and marches out into the jungle because somebody said mean things about him on a poster.
Yeah.
Imagine if 50 or 100 troops get ambushed in Africa and killed, right? I mean, that's like Black Hawk Down right there. That's like the movie, right?
Yeah.
These sort of colonial escapades were going on constantly. Sort of like they're kind of going on now, right? There's troops all over the world up to shenanigans in different countries. Yeah. And if 50 or 100 of them die, then that would be big news. Yeah. Well, anyway, I hope that was interesting to people listening.
What a character.
Thank you for watching or listening, I guess. And have a nice day.
See you next time.
Yep.